Greetings, friends. Your cartoonist pal Stan here with another episode of, well, it's kind of an episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon. I have it kind of uh, branded as Studio Time with Stan. Yeah, Wednesday night is 50 Years in the Dungeon time, but today I'm doing something a little different. This is the second time I've done a studio time. The show itself, the purpose of the show is to celebrate the fact that tabletop role playing games, as just as an entity and as a hobby, is reached its 50th year. We're now going on into the year 52, and want to celebrate that by interviewing folks who worked in the industry. A lot of whom happen to be friends of mine. Those of you who don't know, I don't know, maybe you don't know, I myself have worked in the tabletop role playing game industry full time since about 1994. So that's a long time. Still doing it now. I'm currently working on a project for a client. Can't NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. I can't tell you much, but I can tell you I'm working on a big adventure for a client that I think later on in the spring they'll start announcing something about. Anyway, yes, I've been working in the industry quite a while, and as such, I've got a lot of friends and contacts, and so I invite a bunch of them on, and every once in a while, people I've never met before, which makes me even happier. Get to broaden my circle of friends and learn new things from new people. That's the general purpose of the show. That's what I do here. But sometimes, the other thing I forgot to tell you, the secret bit, not the secret bit, the really cool bit is that while we're chatting, I, being a cartoonist, there's the other thing. I'm also a cartoonist, and I've been doing that since 1982. And so while we're chatting, I will begin to draw a cartoon homage to a classic piece of gaming art. The first 52 of them, 53 of them, were all Dungeons and Dragons themed. Since then, I've been doing other games too. They're celebrating the 50th anniversary of D&D, which was the first tabletop role-playing game, in case you didn't know. So yes, that's what the show usually is. Most of the time, the show is me interviewing someone and doing a drawing at the same time. Now, sometimes, in fact, more last year, I got a little behind in finishing the drawings that I began on the show. So I started doing a second type of show, which I called a work in progress show, where I took a drawing that I had begun on one of the shows and worked on it some more. It's a work in progress. I took it further down the road so I would have some time to finish them, and we wouldn't have too big of a backstock of unfinished drawings. Now we've introduced this third kind of show. I did one of them before. It's called Studio Time with Stan, and that is where I am working on a piece of gaming art and not interviewing anyone. I'm just starting work on a new drawing. In this case, this actually ties back to a previous episode. Now, earlier this month, I think it was earlier this month, a few weeks ago, I did a show where I had a group of 3 people on to help to celebrate the life of Gene Raby, who was a game designer and editor and uh, novelist. Wow, I blanked for a second on which thing I wanted to say next. And a novelist, and one of the leader of the uh, RPGA, the Role Playing Game Association, back in the 90s. I think it was late 80s and early 90s. She had a very, very big impact on the organized play. There's another, again, stumbling over a couple of words today. Sorry about that. She had a very big impact on what has become the current organized play space. It wouldn't be what it is without what Jean did. Plus, she wrote some really great novels and she designed some really great products. And sadly, she passed away in January. And so I got a bunch of people together to come on and talk about her, talk about what she did, talk about the impact she had in the industry. And my intention had been to do some drawing like I usually do on the show. But we had some technical difficulties. I'd never done a show that had 3 guests at the same time, and things got a little crazy. So I shelved the drawing part of that show, and we just had a very nice chat. It was episode 75, I think. If you haven't watched it, please go back. Jean, if you don't know anything about her, is definitely worth knowing about. And if you do know Jean, I think you'll enjoy the conversation we had in her honor. So, that's what happened. Now, as I say, I had a plan to do a drawing that was going to be a cartoon homage to the cover of one of her novels. In fact, a novel that I got to work on at the tail end of it, in the review side of it. It was the first of the Dragonlance Fifth Age novels, and I was on the Dragonlance Fifth Age team. So we got to review the novel and give comments and work. I didn't get to work directly with Jean, but we were exchanging notes, and so I definitely feel like it's not like the part of the novel is mine, but it certainly is a novel that I feel close to that she did, and it's got a great piece of cover art by Jeff Easley, the classic D&D painter. Painted some of the most famous D&D images you can think of. I've already done a bunch of different homages to pieces of Jeff's work. So I was very excited to do that while we were having that particular episode. Things didn't work out. But I still would like to do that drawing. Like, I'd hate for that show about Jean to be the one interview show I have that doesn't have a piece of art that goes with it. So, all of that's the big roundabout explanation to tell you why tonight we're doing the Studio Time show, where I'm going to begin work on the drawing I would have done while we were having that conversation if the tech gremlins hadn't stepped up. Get it? Good. Wow. 7 minutes it took me to do that intro. This has got to be one of my longest intros ever. Hi, Michael in chat. Hello, Carrie Andrew. Thank you both for showing up and saying hi. Glad to see you tonight. I know that we've got folks watching. You can see a little thing. We got people watching on different platforms, and you're free to pop in and put some comments in there. I love chatting. I'm going to talk no matter what. So if you have any questions, any things you'd like to hear me talk about, any particular parts of my career or experiences I had working, maybe with Jean again, or maybe, just kind of in general, drop them in there. I'll talk about that. I'll give some drawing tips, and we'll have a good evening. Sound like fun? Hello, David Schwartz. Thank you for popping in and joining us. So, I'm going to grab my iPad Pro here. I do all of my drawing on an iPad Pro with the app Procreate and an Apple Pencil. I tell you that not because they are sponsors. I get nothing for telling you that except knowing that I am educating you, letting you know what it is that I do, as I say, as a professional cartoonist, how I do my work. There are no sponsors on this show. Now, again, not that there won't ever be. I'm not promising that. I'll make some money off this if I can. But right now, no sponsors. But I do like to share information. And so, there you go. I've grabbed my iPad. I'm getting ready. I'm going to now switch views so you can see what it is I'm drawing. And if you look over here on the left, you can see that this is the cover image for the Dawning of a New Age was the name of the novel. As I said, it was the very first Dragonlance Fifth Age novel. It came out, I think, about the same time as the game, within a few months of the game. And Jean wrote a trilogy, the first trilogy set in this new Fifth Age of the Dragonlance setting, and set set this table for everything that came afterwards. Um, Michael says the current organizer of organized play of Wizards organized play was on Mastering Dungeons today. You know, I will admit that I'm really not even sure what Wizards organized play looks like these days. It's the RPGA is one of those things that uh, it's an institution that never it was always had its hiccups. It always had its lovers and its detractors. Like many things, if you knew about it, you might get you might get totally wrapped in and make all of your or a big portion of your um, convention going about interacting with RPGA, or you might never have heard of it if it you didn't happen to see the ads in a D&D product or dungeon magazine, uh, and have them speak to you enough that you tried it out. You could really, there's a lot going on in RPGA and a lot of things that people, I know, when they discover it later, like, why didn't I know about this till now? And it was the the start, among other things, it was the start of organized play for tabletop role playing games. They had they didn't. I mean, technically, they published in that they had created and printed and sent uh, to the conventions adventures to be played, adventure modules. They started out. They were all called what's the word I'm looking for? They were excuse me. I'm going to stop humming and hawing and just try and think of the word. Tournaments. Tournaments is the word I couldn't think of. They're all called tournaments, and initially, in fact, playing in RPGA events, there was a scoring system that went along with it, and um, it came out of the actual competitive tournaments that were done at Gen Con, the D&D Open. But RPGA started doing a lot more than that. Let's see. Michael says that the WotC organized play organizer says he explains all three programs. They're fueling up. Okay, so it's not surprising I don't know about it. So, Mastering the Dungeons. If you know that show, go check that out. If you don't know it, look it up. And Michael says we got some good information on the D&D uh, organized play. It's going to be in D&D Encounters in stores. Let me put that up there. D&D Encounters in stores. Legends of Greyhawk with 3 indie organizers, Goodman Games, and Adventurers League. Fancy that. Sounds exciting. Yeah, so there were lots of really, and the stuff that came out of RPGA was um, really very often pushed the envelope. There were a lot of really interesting tournaments that got done that. Well, I guess I should start with the initial RPGA tournaments. You were given a pre-generated character with a background and a backstory. Not only a background and a backstory, but you had things you were trying to accomplish during this scenario. So it was all designed specifically for the scenario, and you would be judged in the end on how well you played your character. You'd be judged by the other people at the table. So uh, everyone would come in and they'd have characters. There would be a scenario like there is in any uh, role playing event, and you would get your pre-generated character and your uh, an explanation of the things that you wanted to accomplish, and part of what you were judged on was how well you accomplished those things. So at the end of the adventure, the end of the tournament, the end of the event, everyone would reveal that what their characters had been trying to do and the things about them, and you would all vote. You couldn't vote for yourself, so you voted for one of the other players and how well they did at how good they were at role playing their character, or how at, particularly given the knowledge of this is what they were told they were supposed to do. Anyway, that's what RPGA events started out as, and there was still a lot of that in RPGA all the way through its existence. Uh, Toward the in the 90s, they came up with a second kind of thing called a living campaign. And if you hear about any kind of living campaign now, that's where it started, where you didn't have a pre-generated character, you created your own character, and it was more like a typical home campaign in that you had your character and your character would advance the through play, and it was set in the Forgotten Realms. It was called Living City. It was a an official part of the Forgotten Realms that existed specifically for RPGA's purposes. Gene was one of, maybe the person, certainly one of the people involved in doing that. See, David Schwartz says, I'm a fan of the one shots with integrated pre-gens, but I also know how much harder they are to write. Not necessarily are they harder to write. In fact, it in some ways they're easier to write because, for me anyway, as a adventure designer, when you design an adventure, you've got to when you're writing just doing general adventure design, you need to make it usable for anyone and everyone. You've got to think about all the different kinds of people who are going to be playing this when it comes out. If you're doing one of those one shots with pre-generated adventure, if you're doing a a, um, a tournament or designing an adventure that has pre-generated characters, you can um, you can tailor. You know what resources the characters have. You know what kinds of characters there are going to be there. Sorry, I'm trying to work something out here. Usually I can draw and talk, but there are some parts of it that I need to think about, and that cuts off my speaking part of my brain. Um, anyway, it it reduces the number of unknowns, and so you actually can design more specifically challenges tailored to the characters that are there. And you don't have to do something that will challenge anyone or everyone, or say, well, this could get broken if there's a sixth level wizard in here. The wizard has these three spells, and it will break this. They can bypass it, or they'll they'll have an advantage, or it won't be a challenge for them. But if you deny them those resources, or you just know what resources they have, you can say, okay, well, since they have these resources, I can throw this at them, and I know they've got to use their brains to do it. They won't just roll over it. So to that end, I think that uh, in those ways easier to design for a pre-generated a group of pre-generated characters. But people, one of the reasons that RPGA did this is that people like making their own characters and following them through the adventures they have. Right? As it was, you had people playing all of these RPGA adventures, and not, every time it was a different character. They they couldn't be sure what the pre-gens would be. They couldn't play necessarily the type of character they wanted. And they certainly didn't feel the sense of growth that you get when you're playing your own character, and they level up. So, Living City, or a living campaign like that, gives you all of those things. Now, it takes away some of the interesting bits of trying things you haven't tried before, or being put in the situation. Like I say, the other thing about designing where you can control what resources they have. Uh, One way to look at it is that you are uh, limiting the players and saying, "Well, I know you can think you've thought of this or you want to choose this, but you can't." Another way of looking at it is they're giving them a challenge, saying, "Look, this is what you have. What are you going to do with it? What can you do with it?" And at in home campaigns, this is something that your DM does all the time. You know what characters your players have. You know what they're good at, and what challenges them, and what you can give them that'll make them have to work against type. In the RPGA, early RPGA at tournaments, you couldn't do that. I mean, you could control what they got, but or again, you could do that, but in the Living City games, despite the fact that everyone has their own characters, the DM is now playing with a different set of characters every session, and so it just changes um, it changes where the pressures are, where the challenges are, where where the advantages are. It's an interesting, different kind of game. All right, that's looking pretty good. What am I trying to figure out? I don't know. I'm just rambling right now. What was I trying to figure out drawing? I don't know. I didn't see the question soon enough to when you typed it to answer that. But whenever you work on a drawing, sometimes you can clearly see there's a problem, and sometimes you're just not. You're looking for a particular feeling, and you can't say why am I still fiddling with this. The answer is because you're not hitting the feeling you wanted, and there's no really good reason that you can say. It's not necessarily that there's anything wrong per se. But you haven't landed on the solution that you were looking for. This drawing, or this painting, is challenging in just the differences in scale and that angle that we've got. That looking up at something gigantic is always challenging. Trying to fit it into an interesting layout that features both the giant thing and characters that you will be able to recognize. It's tough. Jeff did a great job here with that. Not surprisingly, really. When I pause to think about it, I don't remember. Oh, I was trying. It was just that. It was trying to figure out how to. So if we look at what Jeff has here, right? We've got that angle that we're looking at um, the dragon at. And whenever I do any of these, you see, one of the things I always have to figure out is these are almost always book covers, so they are in this rectangular size, and I do my drawings in a square shape, a rectangular shape, and a square shape. So I've got to figure out as I'm doing them what I'm going to do to how I'm going to convert this image from a square to a rectangle. What am I going to keep? What am I going to emphasize? What am I going to leave out? That's what I was thinking about there. He looks like he's about to reach for a Red Bull. He's about to reach for a couple of adventures, is what he's about to reach for. Um, yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Like you see here, I make changes in them, right? This when it's done, hopefully, people will look at this and say, "Oh, clearly Stan was doing his interpretation of that cover from Dawning of a New Age." But and I am. But if you look at, I'm not copying it. Just look at where the hand and the head are placed between the two, right? The In Jeff's version, we got the head is down low and the hand is not just in front, but it's kind of it's above it in just the layout of the drawing. But again, this is a vertical kind of rectangle. I'm working on a square, and I want to be able to make the characters. Actually, I'm going to make them larger than they were in the original. We're gonna be forced a little more forward on them like this. I'm not even sure I'm going to keep that, but so that's what I was thinking about was how how I was going to be interpreting this. Have some lightning in the background there because we've got a blue dragon. Um, yeah. Oh, no, let's leave that on there. So yes, that's what I was thinking about when I paused. I had to get it into my head um, what it was that I was about to try to draw. And having done that, I could then continue. I talked to some of my artist friends, and uh, they tell me that the thing that they find um, most interesting about me doing this is that I can talk and draw, and uh, I can when I'm doing uh, the sketching of reinterpreting something that's already there. But the thinking part, as I said, anytime that I'm doing something that's thinking, it's a lot harder for me um, to draw and talk. Let's see, we're going to shift this around a little. Like that. When I'm making construction choices, I've got to think, and if I don't, then I wind up drawing, and without thinking, uh, it just get a mess. Just get a mess. Now let's look at our two here. So let's see what else is going on here. This one of the things I'm not doing, I'm here with you, which means that I'm not in Wisconsin, in Lake Geneva, for GaryCon, which is this weekend. Which is a little sad for me. I've never actually been to GaryCon. Um, for those of you that don't know, GaryCon is named after Gary Gygax, the man that created one of the people who created Dungeons and Dragons. Definitely considered the father of D&D. Exactly how that played out, that's a more complicated story that books are being written about. I don't want to get into that discussion, but he's certainly one of the creators and considered by most to be the father of D&D. And he came from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which is where TSR, the company that I worked for a while, was. And now every year there's a convention that started out as a game day that was done after he passed away, and then has now become um, one of those popular conventions in the annual circuit. And that's held in March of every year. So this weekend is GaryCon, and so a lot of people in the gaming world, in the tabletop RPG world, are in are there this weekend. A lot of my friends are there, and I hope they're all going to be having a good time. It would be nice if I could have made it too. Maybe next year. Um, Michael says that Ed Stark and Phil from Page are both there. Yes, they are there. Jeff Grubb is there. And there's still a lot of the people from TSR, from the TSR days, still live in the Wisconsin area. So, and many of them are involved uh, with GaryCon. Um, but a lot of folks make the trip out for that. One of the reasons is that the Saturday night of every GaryCon, there is a TSR reunion. Anyone who worked for the company is invited to, you know, a reunion, like a high school reunion. Only it's a work reunion. And that's the thing. Of all the stuff, I would love to go to GaryCon because it's a great convention. But if I'm really honest, the thing that I want to go for most is the TSR reunion, because there's a bunch of people I haven't seen in years and years, and some of them since the company shut down. There, that's looking all right. So the way I do these drawings, I haven't talked about this much. Talk about it. So I talk about this actually more on the Thursday show, the um, random encounter show. But the way I draw these homages is the first thing I do is this part of it, where I'm doing a rough sketch that lays it all out. After I've got the layout done, I will take this layer and drop its opacity, fade it back, and then put a new layer on and redraw this with uh, more more decisive lines. Right now, you see everything is really scritchy and scratchy, and I'm erasing bits here and there as I don't need them anymore. But when I'm got it all figured out, I will read rather than try and get rid of the little bits I don't need. I will go back and redraw it on another layer. I'm going to make this a little taller again. That's one of those decisions I made was where I wanted things to be on the page and how to get this feeling of this forced perspective feeling. All right, and then there's going to be some. There we go. Let's see. Chris Andrew, hey, how's it going? And let's see. Gene Raby was unfairly criticized for that trilogy. There's so many great creative ideas breathed life in the world by her and the team. Yeah, so I said before that this drawing is from her novel The Dawning of a New Age, which was the first Dragonlance Fifth Age novel. Now, Dragonlance, of course, had been around for a while, and all of the most popular um, novels, the first novels, and there had, I mean, at that point, there had been something on the order of 90 or over, probably over, I think it was more like 120 Dragonlance novels that had been published over the years, and they fell into roughly three categories. One was two core trilogies that were written by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. Um, the Chronicles, the Legends, the Chronicles and the Legends trilogies. Dragonlance Chronicles was the first trilogy. Dragonlance Legends was the second trilogy, and they told the stories of a particular group of characters, large group of characters. Um, TSR and Margaret and Tracy wrote it as employees of TSR in development with a team of people. They certainly were. They wrote the novels, right? And they took the material that the team came up with, and they led. Tracy in particular was one of the two people that came up with the germs that were taken and put together to create Dragonlance. And so over the years, there were a bunch of Dragonlance novels that were the most popular by far were the ones by Weiss and Hickman. They did those two trilogies, and then they did some short story collections that where they didn't do all the stories in them, but Margaret was the editor, the lead editor, or the creative editor on it, and Tracy certainly. I don't know what his title was. Maybe he also was. That's what they called him. But Margaret and Tracy were involved in that. And then there were a bunch of other novels that were published that were kind of like what I mean. We didn't have that kind of IP centric novel series in those days, in the mid '80s, or that was the day when the time when that was just becoming a thing. There wasn't a series of Star Wars novels, or a series. There was just the beginning of a series of Star Trek novels. There weren't novels that carried on storylines from movies and built worlds like that. Particularly ones like the Star Wars and the Star Trek series, where they're done by different novelists, so you could get multiple novels a year. In fact, in different eras, a novel a month. In some eras, a paperback a month, and 4 hardbacks in the year. So it's another thing that TSR kind of pioneered in what they were doing with Dragonlance. And Forgotten Realms. And we've Forgotten Realms out too. What they were doing with their book department, shall we say. And the fans of Dragonlance were very, very taken with the core storyline and the characters. Like the Star Trek books are all, well, for a while, were all about Kirk and Spock and McCoy in the Enterprise. And when Next Gen came around, there were a series of classic Trek novels and a series of Next Gen novels. And it's now spread out where there are a lot of different novels about a lot of different characters. The same thing in Star Wars. The first Star Wars novels that came out were all about Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie and their further adventures. And as time went along, it kind of spread out and started introducing characters who existed only for the novels, and storyline that was in the same world as Luke and Leia, but they weren't necessarily part of it. And you know, it's true in any series like that. The most popular and the best the best-selling and among the fans the most popular ones will be the ones that continue the storyline, that tell the story of the characters that you care about. When I talk about it with the when we used to talk about it in TSR, I would call it the soap opera effect. You want to know what's going to happen next. The other novels expand the universe, and the most dedicated fans, or the dedicated fan base, wants those too, and they want to know more and more about what's happening in a wider and wider vision. And they sometimes will go back and tell what happened in the past. Well, we mentioned in this novel that this happened. It was the character said this, and he said 150 years ago, so and so did this thing. All right, well, let's make a whole novel about that. Tell the whole story of how they did the thing. There are a lot of people, a lot of fans, more casual fans, fans who were not in the gaming area too. Who really didn't care. Right? That's minutia. I don't care. I want to know what happens next to the main characters. I don't care what happened here and there. We already know how that ends. Same kind of people that don't want to watch Titanic because they know the ship sinks. Sorry, spoilers. For me, it's about how the story gets told. The story's told well. I don't care that I know the ending. Anyway, the soap opera effect. The stories about the main characters were the ones that sold best. And sales on Dragonlance were fading over time, understandably, and TSR was going to cancel the whole line. But they got, and the company and Margaret and Tracy had a falling out. Margaret and Tracy were no longer involved. So the fans who knew and loved their work, and Margaret and Tracy were very good with the fans, and with convention presence, and they're terrific people and entertaining storytellers, not just on the page but in person. So there was a strong undercurrent of people who just didn't. If it wasn't by Margaret and Tracy, they weren't buying it. And if it wasn't about the characters, the main characters, it wasn't in the storyline, it wasn't along the soap opera, they weren't buying it. And if it wasn't by Margaret and Tracy, they didn't care at all. It's not everyone. Certainly not. It doesn't really speak to how good or bad the novels were. Just people wanted the storyline. And so TSR and Martin Tracy settled their differences enough to have Martin Tracy come in to write one more novel. They'd done 2 trilogies and a bunch of short story stuff, and other things too. And but this was it. TSR was going to retire the Dragonlance series, and they got Martin and Tracy to come in and write one. Was going to be the last Dragonlance book. I was not in any of those meetings. That was before I got there, but I know from talking to people that that's kind of how it was pitched to Margaret and Tracy. This is it. This is the last one. Wrap it up. And they put out a novel called Dragons of Summer Flame, which took all the characters, all the threads that were sitting out there, and put them all together. Had one big apocalyptic adventure, and wrapped it up. And TSR put it out as a hardcover book, and it sold like gangbusters. It was a New York Times bestseller, and that wasn't happening for Dragonlance anymore at that stage. And so TSR, who owned the Dragonlance property, always had, looked at that and said, "Oh, well, we don't have to be done." And that's how Dragonlance Fifth Age got to be, got its start, right? And then different people were brought in, blah 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 blah. Big story. That's a different story to tell. Probably when I have other people to talk to, and it's not just me telling it. But when they decided they were going to do Fifth Age, so the end of the Summer Flame ended the Fourth Age of Kryn. In fact, the very last thing in the novel, in the last chapter, they say the Fifth Age of Kryn had now begun, the Age of Mortals, and that was their Martin Tracy's way of wrapping it up with a bow and saying, "Okay, it's all yours now. The story is done." Business being what it is, TSR decided it was not done, and Margaret and Tracy had no interest in. They had their own careers at this point, doing best-selling novels of their own. So they needed someone else to write the novels, because if they were going to do a New Age of Dragonlance, there had to be new novels, and everything had been wrapped up. And so I was not there for the whole process of figuring out what the story would be, but it got done, some combination of the game department and the books department. I wouldn't be surprised if the game department really kind of took lead on that, because then the book department had to find someone to write the novel. It was basically kind of like what I was saying before. The game defined what happened in the world of Kryn, and Gene got hired to write a novel about that. Or, in fact, not just a novel, a trilogy of novels. The New Age trilogies, of which Dawning of a New Age was the first book. So all this to say, I'm going off what Chris Andrews said. The fans were of mixed mind about this, in particular because at this point it was the dawn of the internet. Margaret and Tracy were both on there, and they expressed their less than complete satisfaction that they'd been told that this was going to be it, and now someone else is writing Dragonlance, and no, Dragonlance is done. We finished it. And so there were a lot of people who just decided they weren't going to like it because it wasn't what Margaret and Tracy did, and it wasn't what they wanted. And be damned, what a sight unseen. They didn't like it. They didn't like the ideas. They didn't like the fact that the game existed. Particularly, it wasn't Dungeons and Dragons. It was some new game that used cards. And this new novel series written by Gene Raby. What? Who's a Gene Raby? And Gene had written some novels before this. This wasn't her first one. She got this because she'd written a series of really good books for the book department. And she was friends with Margaret and Tracy, but Margaret lived locally. And so I know that she talked to Margaret. I know we talked to Margaret. There's a difference between Margaret's and Tracy's interactions with the company and the the interactions with the other creatives. So people didn't like this because because of what it was, and they didn't. There were people out there that were like that, and they didn't give it a chance at all. And there are a lot of people that gave Gene a lot of guff over these novels because they didn't want them to be. And that, for certain, is not Gene's fault. It reminds me of another story I've heard. Bob Salvatore, R.A. Salvatore, who's most famous for his Driz novels. He wrote one Star Wars novel, and they gave it to him, telling them that they wanted him to write it, and it was the book where in that continuity, in that pre-revision continuity, it was a book where Chewbacca died. It was the death of Chewbacca, and I've been in conversations with Bob where he talks a lot about how much grief, how much hate mail he got from the fans because he killed Chewbacca. But it's not like he came in saying, you know what I want to do is kill Chewbacca. They hired him to do that. That was the job. Same for Jean. Say what you will about whether or not you think Fifth Age was a good idea. That's not her. That's not her doing in any way. That was not her doing in any way. And so she got a lot of guff about the book. And like I say, a great many people judged it without having read a word, or even reading it, judged it having predetermined that they were going to find reasons to hate it. And nowadays, we're well past that. Let's switch to a happier kind of subject. Nowadays, we're well past that, and I think that the books are well thought of and regarded because Gene did a good job writing them. We, as the Dragonlance team, the Fifth Age team, got to comment on her drafts, and the game came first in this case, and had established had made some changes to the world, and we needed them to be reflected. So we got to comment a lot on what was going into the book. It's a tough thing, At that stage, I was 30 years old when that happened, and it was still in my first 5 years full time in the industry. I'd had a different career before then. And I look back at some of the things we did, and I would do it differently today. What we were commenting on, very often despite the fact that we weren't supposed to be commenting on story, we couldn't help ourselves sometimes. And I think that was, there are places where how am I going to say this? We, as a fan group, can be very hidebound about the book says this, therefore that's what it is. We, as game designers, complain sometimes when fans will pull that kind of thing. But we, as people working on the product and caring about it, we're just as hidebound about you're writing this novel. These things matter and these don't. And well, why does this character is supposed to represent X, Y, and Z? It's a novel. Let it be a novel. Anyway, that is all to say that I think that looking back on it, I think even we were a little extra critical about the work Gene was doing at the time. But all of that was private and in-house. We did nothing but support it, and I'm glad that in the end she got to write these. It was a really good trilogy. Anyway, there you go. Congratulations, Chris. You got me to ramble for about 15 minutes and just say Dragonlance stuff. All right, so here we go. I think now I'm finally done with this rough sketch. I've de-roughed a bunch of it. I've got them where they want them, and now I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to drop the opacity. Let me make it so you can see more about it. So there is. Come on. Move you off to the side. There is the sketch. I'm going to drop the opacity, and you can see it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. And I'm going to drop it low, and then I'm going to, on a second layer, redraw that in more decisive lines, which I will then, after I finish that, go and draw again, this time with black lines, which in you can think of these in physical media terms as what I've done so far, despite the fact that it's very bright and strong. What I've done so far is the light sketching, what I would do very lightly with a pencil, and I would wind up with something that was sketchy like that. Then I would draw it more with the pencil, again, fixing things and making sure everything worked. And then when I had the whole drawing done in pencil, then I'd go in and grab whatever I'm going to use to ink, whether it's a pen or a brush or a digital tool. So, yeah, so right now we've done the sketch level. Now I'm going to do the pencils level. It's a little too light. There we go. And I'm going to start doing what I sometimes will show you, put things on different layers. So I'm going to draw the dragon and the standing stones on one layer, and I'm going to draw the humans on a separate layer. Just so you know. Let's see. Michael in chat says, talking about shared world stuff. Wild Cards, the series by George R.R. Martin, the superhero series of short stories. Well, he didn't write all of them. It's another kind of shared world short story anthology, building a world like that. And that came in that same era too. And I remember when the Wild Card books were coming out and going to the game store that I was shopping at the Game and Comics store. Fat Cat Books in Johnson City, New York, in case you're wondering. So, yeah, I'm not sure which came first, the chicken or the egg, or where in the kind of developmental history of shared world, multi-author fiction it crops up. But it's certainly there in those very early days. But certainly at the same time that was coming out, I remember there were already lots of Dragonlance books. That was a point when I think there were close to a Dragonlance book a month. I know it was never actually that many, but it felt like it. There was a Dragonlance book each month. There was a Forgotten Realms book each month. Or so it felt. And it's close to true. And there was also, talking about things like that, the Lynn Abbey's Thieves' World was another one of those very early uh, experimenters in that shared world fiction realm. It was a heady time of new things being tried. It's really so hard to remember, or for those who weren't there, who it didn't happen in their senior year in high school, or came to it later on, where you're reading it from uh, as an existent thing in a world where it's just assumed that that's going to happen. It's really hard for uh, folks who don't have that perspective to understand how different it was. How what a unique new way of interacting with your favorite uh, setting and movies and TV shows. So the um, until then, all we really had were the novelizations of movies, which is not to say that's not anything, but it's very different than new stories being told about the characters. The you know you wound up uh, in that era with some great things and some things that are not really well remembered in the same way that the Star Wars Christmas special is not well remembered. Those first Star Wars novels, The Splinter of a Mind's Eye and Han Solo and the Corporate Sector. I don't remember what the name of that novel was. The publishers and even the owners of the property didn't have the understanding of needing to really be good stewards uh, of their properties for future use. The uh, there's a lot of letting things happen in books because it doesn't really matter. And there was certainly Splinter of the Mind's Eye is famous because it it went with what we knew at the time, the idea that Luke and Leia were going to be a romantic couple. There was no hint that they were going to wind up being brother and sister, and so Splinter of the Mind's Eye is a little weird. Michael says he snatches up every copy of Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Now, is that because you like it, or because you're trying to rid of it so that other people don't accidentally run into it? There we go. Now you can see I'm drawing the same thing again, but again I'm making very much more specific, clean choices you know uh, rather than the sketchy version that I had in the previous one, where I was feeling it out. I was trying to figure out where the uh, where I needed the image to be, where I wanted things to happen. Again, based on someone else's drawing, which is one of the reasons why I can draw and talk about it. I'm not really having to think about the image from scratch. I'm interpreting something that's already there. And that is just an easier load on the brain. At least it is for me. As I say, I know a bunch of other cartoonists and artists who um, who tell me it's not a big enough difference of the load on their brain. They can't have a conversation while they're drawing. They've got to focus on that. And as long as I'm iterating on something that exists and not coming up with it from scratch, I seem to be able to do that. And thank goodness, because otherwise this show wouldn't exist. Like it says, Splinter of Mind's Eye is one of his favorite books. I don't have a problem with different continuities. I read comic books. Yeah, well, you know what? Wow, there's a conversation. And certainly a conversation I've been a part of as a fan and as a professional. The the double-edged sword of continuity, and when it serves your purposes and when it's worth letting go. Comic book continuity, ooh boy, that can get downright ugly. And you know what? Certainly with the Marvel movies, DC movies, and Star Wars and Star Trek are getting there too. Once you've had a creative property go on long enough, it's almost it's almost against uh, um, trying to phrase this right so I don't say something that when it gets quoted back to me uh, makes me sound like an idiot. But it's sometimes better to break continuity than hold on to facts that facts that were established 20, 30, 40 years ago. The properties need to speak to a modern audience, and we see a lot things that were considered okay in a previous era just don't age well. And if you're going to be hidebound to the continuity, what we said, what they said in uh, the original 72 episodes of Star Trek, that's true, and that's how it's got to be, and don't contradict it. Well, all right, then you're letting yourself in for a lot of things that were considered sometimes even very progressive when they were written, and now are hopelessly outdated and unacceptable. It's unacceptable in modern culture. You gotta give yourself the freedom if you want your property to go on living, to go on being popular for future generations. You've got to let it the intention be more important than the facts in a lot of regards. Just because there are movies or TV shows or books out there that say X, Y, and Z is true doesn't mean it has to remain the case. I'm going to tell you one of the interesting things when we were doing Fifth Age work is that at that point, as I say, Dragonlance had over 100 novels, and there were a lot of things that were said in those novels. And a lot of them wound up being contradictory, or even in that short a period of time, something that we didn't want to move forward with. We had a rule when we were working on Fifth Age products, and that's that we were never going to come right out and say that something that was in print was not, well, maybe not never. Our goal was not to come out and say something that that was in print was not true. We didn't want someone who bought that product, particularly in these cases novels. Every novel that comes out, every product that comes out is something I've talked a lot with people I've worked with about, and tried to impress upon the newer designers and writers that I've gotten to work with over the years. Everything that comes out is going to be someone's favorite thing. No matter how much you might look at something and say, well, that doesn't matter. We can just ignore that. Someone loves that thing, and they will be mad if you say that the thing they love, you know what, just doesn't matter anymore. In fact, forget it. That didn't happen. So, we tried our best not to ever do that, and just kind of selectively focus on the things we wanted to remain true. And whenever possible, just explain off what these alternative positions as someone told that story and they were wrong, or that's what that character thinks. It turned out for me to be particularly important in how I approached writing the Dragonlance bestiary. I got a lot of guff from fans of the series. As I said before, there were 100 books, 100 novels already, at least more than that, in the Dragonlance series, and some of them, kind of like we're talking about with Splinter of the Mind's Eye, some of them, the book department had was less. Wow, that's really throwing the book apart. The process as it stood, the amount of time that was given, and I'm not blaming people involved. The process as it existed made it difficult for all for continuity to be tracked as cleanly as it is today. We certainly didn't have the kind of computer databases and stuff. People were just kind of going off remembering what happened here, there, or in another novel, or where. And the idea that any of it really mattered was kind of sketchy too. So there's a bunch of things that happened in some of the novels that uh, either contradicted what had been said before or contradicted what would be said by Margaret and Tracy in a novel or by a game product in another, or by a game designer in a game product. And in fact, there were a couple of series of, a whole series of novels. Uh, say the not just Margaret and Tracy and Gene Raby, the TSR book department like to work in trilogies and quadrilogies and have a series of books. And there are whole series, whole trilogies or septets where the fan base just doesn't like the premise or doesn't or things are contradicted that they uh, they can't abide, and so the whole things they want to write off those whole series. Except there's some people who love those things, and so when I was writing the bestiary, I made use of. Well, I was supposed to be gathering everything we know about all the creatures in the world of Krynn, the world of Dragonlance, and so I was using anything that had been in print as a resource for defining the creatures, and to do that, I use the I don't know. I don't even think that I came up. Say this was the idea: was that the book would be written by one of the characters from the series, and that's how. And it's one of the big adventurers. So it was the idea was he had decided to write a memoir about all the creatures that he had seen and fought, and all the creatures in the world. Um, and so he used any of the materials from any of the books, and several of them he was in. He was portrayed in the character in a way that the fan base didn't love. Again, because it flew in contrast to what had been said in other materials before and since. So I just decided, again, because of who the character was, this fit pretty well, that he was an unreliable narrator. He just liked telling stories. He was known to spin a few yarns. And if it's not true and the people like it, all the better. You tell that story again. And so that worked so well. But there were people that couldn't even accept that because uh, they hated the book that it came from so much. I got a lot of flack about those. Anyway, we spent a lot of time thinking about continuity, and I definitely have come to the opinion that it's it's good every once in a while to let your absolute details be more fluid, more not carved in stone like we got these drawings here carved in stone. And that have however that having been said, I'm also a fan, and I'm as rabid about wanting continuity and characters to be right as anyone I know. So we talked about Star Trek. I'm not a Star Wars person the way a lot of my friends are. Not that I don't like Star Wars, don't get me wrong, but it was never my jam the way Star Trek was. And I've read a lot of Star Trek novels and a lot of uh, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and I have a lot of Star Trek knowledge floating around. The Marvel and Star Trek, maybe the two things I have the most uh, random bits of trivia floating in my head for. And I can sometimes get a little when I see what's done on some of the newer Star Trek TV shows, or the Star Trek movies, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies in particular, where I get I get furious, or I got furious about a bunch of the changes they decided to make, or a bunch of the truths they decided to ignore. And when I look at it, the the thing that they have that the things that bug me most have in common is not so much that I'm mad because they're different than what was in the original. It's because I'm mad because they don't seem to respect the original, and that was one of the things that probably comes out of how much work we did with Dragonlance to respect the original, and yet still try to um, bring it to a new audience, bring it to a more modern audience. So, where am I going with that? I don't know. Nowhere, I guess. Now you'll see that I'm drawing in areas where, in theory, I don't need to. I talk about this sometimes too. I try to do as complete a drawing. Oh, the angle on that's wrong. Great gravy. Um, all right. I try to do as complete a drawing as possible, even if the details are going to be hidden in the end by the characters in front of them. And I'll tell you why in a second. I'm trying to eyeball this so that it. There we go. That's right. So we can see if I drop the opacity on this one, also, you can see that the our characters are going to be blocking a lot of what I just drew. But when it comes time to do the finished piece, when I'm doing the inking and the characters, and sometimes I'll look at it and say, yeah, I wish this was just, it'd work better if they were a little over here. I didn't notice that I was causing this problem. If I draw these labels, uh, if I draw this level as complete with no concern for what's going to be blocked, I can move it. I can move things around and not have to draw and re-add stuff. It's a fun little thing for final tweaks and making sure that characters are the layout is what the best it can be. Alright, and now I've got to fix some of this because texture-wise, I want to get this to look a little closer to what Jeff did. I got very straight lines here, and you can see that the original drawing is more rounded. And some of these, I put this in here. It doesn't. I don't. It's another thing where, like the between the sketch and the pencil level, I can kind of leave some notes to myself, and then clean it up with a finished finished pencil drawing here. Well, same thing's going to happen when I do the ink version. Some of this, I can do it a little sloppy here, so that things seem to be in the right position. And then when I do the ink version, or do the final ink version, I can execute it in a way that makes it look even more decisive and absolute. Getting rid of these straight lines and putting in more rounded, stepped look. Here we go. And I'll have to do something to make it feel a little more rocky, to give it a little texture. But again, that's a kind of refining detail in the end. Let's look at this other one. Does it have a similar, a different vibe to it? It's not quite as layered. All right, Michael, thank you for popping in. Michael says he's got to head out. Thank you. Always glad to see you, my friend. Hope you had some fun and that you have a good week. And hopefully maybe I'll see you some tomorrow. I don't remember. I remember last week you were in Ohio. I don't remember whether you've got something going on. But always good to see you when you can make it. Let's see. What do we have going on here? Okay. So here, we've got a carving of a dragon. Again, most of this is not going to get seen. I'm going to put it in anyway. Suppose I might in another. If I really wanted to break it down, I might want to just put the stones on a completely separate layer all their own, and finish drawing this part of it too, and just take the dragon out entirely. But I'm going to keep the dragons and the stones on one layer. Hello, Tina. Hello, 37. How are you? Thank you for popping in and saying hi. Glad to see you here. All right. Anything else? I've rattled on a fair bit with Dragonlance and Star Trekky kind of thoughts. Anything else folks wanted? And of course, some artistic tips. Anything else people want to hear me chat about? There we go. Right. All right, so now I'm going to do what I often do, and I'm going to add another layer, and I'm going to switch to the. I do my first levels in blue. I like to do my second levels in purple, and I'm going to put the characters on that level. Matthew Snow says Gail Simone recently asked on Facebook favorite superhero costume and the artist. Huh. That's all right. Let me think about that. Favorite superhero costume and the artist. Um, so I don't know that this is my final answer, but the first thing that pops into my head is uh, the character, the Marvel character Jack of Hearts. Um, who came out of Iron Man, I think, in the early 80s. Had a little bit of popularity. Had a mini series, and then disappeared for a while. Then came back and was completely uh, transformed and taken out of commission, quite probably forever. I like the character. I like the concept of the character. Um, I like the look. They designed this costume based on the uh, the look of a playing card, Jack. And so, the character, because it was created in some nuclear explosion, half his face was black. So they had, uh, you know, kind of stylized uh, half black face with a heart shape over the eye. But the costume itself was um, was notoriously difficult to draw because it was so complicated. It had all the fancy patterning and detailing of a Jack with the big shoulders and the very detailed um, patterns on it. And word was it that artists hated it. Um, it was a really good looking costume. Uh, yeah, George Perez did it well. Rudy Nebris did an issue of Marvel Premiere with Jack of Hearts, and he did a great job of it. But apparently, Perez and everyone just hated it because it was so difficult, so time consuming to draw, and you had to be so careful with the details. And take him out of that costume, and he's not nearly as cool, right? That really is a big part. That's probably one of the reasons why it's one of my favorites. It's a costume that the character is really comes to life because of the costume. You change it, and he's there wasn't enough there. The character itself really was a fashion statement. So yes, he's definitely one of my favorites. Um, Michael and Chat, who I thought had left, uh, points out, yes, the Royal Flush Gang, who were villains for the um, the Justice League, also had very similar uh, costumes, the same kind of costume design. I guess the thing about that is, as a group of villains, you don't have to draw them repeatedly. You have a character, a main character, a hero, who is uh, who has that kind of costume. You've got to draw that every issue and probably most panels of every issue you ever do. Let's see, what Timberwolf by Steve Lightly. Yeah, Steve Lightly did a really good job. Did he make a new costume for Timberwolf, or was he just finally someone who did the traditional one? Timberwolf was a member of the Legion of Superheroes. Wow. You know what? I'll tell you what. I love Jeff Easley's paintings. I love his character design. I never liked this woman's face. I just I don't not that there's anything wrong with it. It's all about being appealing, not and I don't mean in a realistic, not like I think she's pretty, but it's just like as a painting, I never found this particular face appealing. So I'm going to change it. I'm not going to again, I'm interpreting uh, these paintings, not trying to recreate them. And so I'm going to interpret her into a face I like better. Now, I have the advantage of having to change it anyway since I'm cartooning it up. But I feel like we're close, and I can tell you this. It's not that I'm making a mistake in not getting it right. I'm choosing to do it differently. I'm coming back here. Jack Hart's welcome to the Royal Flush Gang. Perez should talk. His Jericho costume was yeah, yeah. Well, it's true, and I think the thing that comes out of that, the thing that I take out of hearing stories about that is that you don't you when you're drawing you're creating the costume, you're creating the character design, you coming up with the coolest thing you can, and you really don't think about how often you're going to have to redraw it, and whether or not that's still going to be fun after the the 50th page of running story that you have to draw that costume in. Let's see what we got going here. Michael says he was fluffing his pillow when I asked him a question. Uh, Apparently, Lightly did do a new design with a large wolf head chest. I thought that's what the original was, but I didn't pay that close attention. So I'm gonna just trust that you're right. You've earned that from me. I trust that you're right. Not sure what's going on her shoulder here. She's got some kind of. It doesn't look like it's supposed to be a tattoo. I mean, it's clear it's some kind of strap and then a decorative piece above it. I don't know. I'm feeling like I could maybe disregard some of that. Right now I've given her just an armband, but let's see about going back in there and be a little more. Nope, I like the armband better. But we'll give it a little decoration just to pay tribute to what Jeff had going on there. Hello, Kianata at Kianata. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Just trying to get the positioning on that arm right. But that hand is not right. Let's see, gonna have a sword being drawn off from there. Be like that, and that, and that. It's about right. Hey, Aaron, doing good. How are you? Having a good night doing some basic drawing. Yes, for those of you like Aaron who've come in late, tonight I am doing a. Tonight is a what I'm calling a studio time episode where I'm not working on something that was previously drawn. I'm starting a new drawing, but this one is ties back to the uh, episode 75 where we were talking about uh, the life, work, and impact of Gene Raby, um, who passed away sadly in January. Oh, those fingers are a little sausagey. See, among the other, so yes, let me finish that thought. So yes, this is a drawing that of the cover to one of Gene's novels. It's what I had intended to draw during the show, but we had all those tech problems that day. Anyway, what was I saying? I don't remember. Hmm, not taking that. Need it to be going down a little more. Basically, I want the sword to be coming down on this angle. She's drawing it off a scabbard on her back, which she clearly is. But over here, you can see that she's holding the sword, and we can see a little bit of it back there, and I don't. I don't know. I could undo all this. Let's go back and see what I had before. If that's going in, the sword's going there. Yeah, I don't know. The thing, now undone all that. I can't redo it. So because of where she is on the page, you can see that sword. Because of where she is on the page, if I want it to show it, the sword's going to go off, and the tip is going to be way off. I know you can't see where my pen is pointing, but way off the bottom of the drawing. So, all right, I'm going to go and redo what I just did before. We want this to come up this way, so we're going to have the sword be coming out there. There we go. I feel better about that. Let's see. I'm thinking about some other. This is a question of superhero. What superhero costumes you like? And I said Jack of Hearts. Um, oh, David's got to get going. Thank you for stopping in, David. Good to see you. I don't know how much longer I'm gonna. I'm gonna finish the drawing. I'm gonna do these two characters, and then our character is standing over there. But I think that will be the end for me tonight, also. So probably another 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20. Yeah, so characters, superheroes whose costumes I particularly like. It's weird. I mean, I'm a superhero. I'm a Marvel guy from way back. I'm a comic book loving nerd, and yet this question is kind of feeling tough for me. I as a question, I'm trying to think of costumes that when I saw them, I thought, "Ooh, that's nice." It's it's easier to remember costumes that you didn't like, and I don't want to talk about. I don't want to do negative talk like that. I remember when back in Uncanny X-Men during the John Byrne days, when uh, when he first changed Wolverine's costume. Um, feeling uh, having mixed feelings about it because I liked the Wolverine original, you know, yellow and blue, but I think that what it's now a classic costume too, right? The brown brown and black or dark brown version of Wolverine's costume. I remember how sharp that looked when he changed costumes. Uh, how that appeared uh, and grabbed my attention straight away in a positive way. Um, who else? I mean, it's strange because I have memories of definitely the first time you see characters particularly see them on a cover of a magazine. You go, "Ooh, who's that? I want to know more about that." And that absolutely happened to me, and I can't remember for the life of me who the characters were. I'm not sure here. So in this, definitely, you know, very shadowed eyes because of how small he is on the painting and how far in the distance he is. Um, I really like. This is not a superhero, but I really like Matt Wagner's design for Grendel. There's a super classic, you know, design which then got reinterpreted multiple times. The way that that comic and storyline uh, got told. Each new version of Grendel had their own interpretation of it. I like of I liked some of which bet more than others, but the basic design, the basic costume design, the central elements that remain true in every version of it is a really good costume. Um, I'll tell you one of the ones I didn't like ever. Um, that's not true. I was about to say something that wasn't true. One of the things that didn't grab me the way it seemed to grab the rest of the world was the all black Spider-Man costume, which has become the Venom design. And the thing is that for Venom, I like it, and it's gone on to be more appealing to me. I don't really like the character of Venom all that much, but um, that costume design works really well for Venom. I didn't like it for Spider-Man at the time. I remember the entire world going gaga over that all black suit, and having conversations with my friends at the time about how it didn't grab me. I get what they were going for, but I couldn't wait for the red and blue suit to come back. I don't play a lot of computer games myself. Um, I just don't have time for it. I know that when I do play them, I get very obsessed with them, so I basically don't let myself play a lot of them. But wow, he looks kind of chunky, doesn't he? He certainly looks chunkier in my drawing than he does in the original painting. How am I going to do this? I don't want to redraw the whole thing. I kind of like how most of that came out. But I'm going to grab that body and make it a little smaller. There we go. And come back and do this. See, again, the beauty of working in this digital format. If I was working traditionally, I'd absolutely have no choice but to go and redraw all that. Yeah, so I really didn't like so I was talking about the computer game. So a friend of mine does play and will stream on Twitch, and I enjoy putting that on as a background noise when I'm doing some drawing or different things, and he plays games that I like. So I've watched him doing. Doing some Batman games at Arkham, one of the Arkham series, and he did the most recent Spider-Man game last year, and he likes to collect all of the costumes and try them on, and I don't know that I'd say I get a kick, but I enjoy looking at them, and we'll talk about them through the chat about which costumes are good and how they look, and they came up with some really good alternative Spider-Man costumes uh, for that game. Some of which appeared in the series, like the 2099 costume and variants of the 2099 costume, and other ones where they would list what storyline or what comic it came from. And I don't remember them off the top of my head. But then there were some others that they just made up, and they were bonkers. Matthew says he's always partial to the many iterations of Hobgoblin. One of the things I like about Hobgoblin, at the time that Hobgoblin came out, Green Goblin had been around for 25 years, 25 years, and just felt a little goofy. What they'd done with the character, it was, they kind of had to do certain things. That it, it, it just, when Green Goblin in the early comics was supposed to be freaky and kind of scary. And I think they did a good job with Hobgoblin, of taking that goblin concept from Green Goblin and the basic design, and remaking it, reinterpreting it into a scary, creepy costume, and then, as you say, Matthew, doing doing further variations on it, which were good. Yeah, no, um, Hobgoblin is a really good costume, and like I say, one of the interesting things about it is how much it is an interpretation of an earlier costume. All right, that's looking good. Turn on. That's what our. All right. One of the things we're going to have to figure out. Well, I don't. In fact, I think we're going to have to remember as I do this is that because I've given such strong lines to the dragon, these characters who are closer up are going to need strong black lines so they look closer. It's not exactly what Jeff Easley did in his drawing. He definitely wants the dragon to be the main focus. You could be forgiven for really not noticing a lot of the details on those characters in that painting. It's Dragonlance, after all. It's about the dragons, and particularly in 5th Age, we were playing up the newer, bigger, scarier dragons that we'd put into the game. But just as a drawing here, I think I'm going to try to make the characters pop a little more. Although certainly with the bright colors, Jeff did a fine job of that in the original painting. So I said earlier, I'm not trying to recreate what he did. I'm trying to do my interpretation of it. Tell you what, right now in black and white with that shirt, he looks kind of like Luke Cage. So I've got to give him the end of his fuchsia headband. This character, I tell you, I think that Gene created these characters. Well, some of them, some of them were characters that had been created. She was novel. She was interpreting in the same way I'm interpreting. She was interpreting for the novel, but this was definitely one of her characters. But she described him. You know, he's supposed to be this swashbuckling. In fact, I'm not going to say supposed to be. He was this swashbuckling uh, pirate character. Um, but he also was all about the clothes. I mean, it's really, I, it's not at all wrong. It does not even like it doesn't fit, but it just struck me as strange when I was reading it. And clearly, Jean and everyone who knows her, Jean did like clothes and like not high fashion, but I don't even know whether or not she liked high fashion, but it wasn't always high fashion. But she liked costumery and clothing, and so that part of her interest, the piratey blouses, and this character, this pirate character, spent a lot of time thinking about clothes, and when they made going from town to town in the novel, when they landed, they had some extra time. He was always happy to go do a little shopping, um, and it it worked. It's fine, but I remember when we were reading the drafts of the novel the first time through, everyone on the team was like, everyone on the team separately knows like he's doing a lot of shopping. He really wants to. He cares about what he looks like, and it would just I don't know. It's just so it's such a funny trait to give a character in an adventure. You know, this let's say they're running around fighting in dungeons and crawling around in the mud. But when he gets a chance, he wants to put on a nice clean shirt and look good. Way to go, Rig. You do you. I don't know. I certainly never heard anyone else, any readers or fans, talk about the fact that they noticed it. I suppose it, if anything, the only thing that bothered me about it was how conspicuous it was. Um, but you know, looking at it with hindsight, like it's no more conspicuous than anything else. It's, it's a novel. It's a character. Um, I'm sure that there was not a little bit of of wondering if it was you know signaling his signaling a sexual preference, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I was about to say except, and I don't. There is no. There's nothing wrong with that either. But it was unusual and not the kind of thing that TSR novels certainly did at the time, and many people in TSR management would not have been comfortable with. Um, but there you go. All right, so there are human characters, and you can see our dragon character in the background. But if I turn the sketch off, there. So this is the pencil sketch for this drawing. I wonder if I should take this layer, alpha lock it, make this purple darker, just so they stand out a little more. It's easier to see them there. Doesn't really matter. You're never going to have to see it this way. And when I do the drawing, I'm going to be looking at only one layer at a time. But for showing off what we've done tonight, that's a little easier to see it. Though you can, of course, still see right through them to the background behind. But there you go. Dawning of a New Age. Cartoon homage. Pencil stage. That's what we got. I will try to find some time to do the inking. It may be another that, and now if I come back to this, it'll it'll be a work in progress video. I talked a lot at the top of this episode about the different types of shows I've been doing, and that this one as a studio time show is because I'm starting a new drawing from scratch. When I come back to it again, this will be a work in progress episode. But I've got other works in progress to deal with first. The last time I did one, let's just kind of pop in here and show you. I did this one. I did last week. Was it just last week? Yeah, it was. So this one is still here. I haven't done any of the coloring on it. So still got to do the coloring on that one, and then I've got to do the inking on this one. This one needs to be finished up. I'm not super happy with what I did on this, but I don't think I'm going to spend the time it would take to really affect a lot of changes. But I'll when I do the inking, I'll fix that up some. Maybe that'll be the next. Well, we'll see. I've got to finish the Dragon 126 drawing. I've got to and do the coloring and finish that, and then it'll be time to work on the Lost Library drawing, and then I will get to this. But now the pencils are done, and it's in the queue. I got 4 unfinished remaining. I got closer to that for a while, pulled a little ahead. I think we're going to have more work in progress episodes in March and April. I don't have a lot of interviews lined up, and I'm kind of busy, so I'm not doing what I need. I'm not doing the groundwork I need to do to set it up. Not that if I can get some people to respond, I'll drop in interview episodes too. Maybe I'll. Last year when I did a bunch of these work in progress videos, I would sometimes have like Dale Donovan and Jeff Quick and other friends of mine, just to hang out and chat. Troy Hewitt came and did that. Maybe I'll try and schedule some co-hosts, some chat uh, uh, friends while I do work on these. I don't know. I don't know. I guess that's what I'm saying is the what you're going to see over the next month or so of this show. I don't know. But I will try, and yeah, I think it's better when I bring some other people in because uh, after a while, I mean, I don't run out of things to say. I'll talk anyway, but I think you might run out of patience for me just blathering off the top of my head. Anyway, all right, let's put that down and come back here, change the views, and it's back to just me. So we did a drawing. We went from just the reference to a finished pencil. Talked a little bit about how I did it. Talked a little bit about the background of it, and just hung out for a while. Had some fun conversation. Thank you to everyone who showed up today and hung out. Thank you to everyone here who stuck all the way to the end. I appreciate that. This has been another episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon / Studio Time. If you're enjoying this, I'll tell you what I would really, really appreciate is if you could take the time to give it a thumbs up or a like or a heart, whatever it is on the platform you're watching. And when I wrap up in a minute or two, I know there's a bunch of you who are in chat, and I super appreciate you guys. But if folks could take the time to leave a comment in the YouTube comment section when it's on replay, that is between the likes and the subscription. Oh, if you're not subscribed, are you not subscribed? I know most of you are. If you're not, holy cats, you're here this long having this kind of fun. You like what I do. Click subscribe, for goodness sake. And leave a comment. I promise I'll respond. I respond to every comment I get. So there, if you want to hear back from me, that's one good way to do it. You can follow everything that's going on in this show for 50 Years in the Dungeon over at our free newsletter at 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com. Go visit there. You will, in fact, on Monday, sometime early next week, I will be posting this penciled version of what we did today, so you can have a copy. You can look at it more, download it, have a copy. I don't know, show your friends, paint it yourself, laugh at it, and call me silly. I don't care. You'll have your copy. You can do what you want. All kinds of extra bonuses for folks who join the newsletter, and you get all of the information first. You'll be the first people to know who the new guests are, what I'll be drawing. You'll get the sketches. You'll get the in-between work. You'll be the first ones to get the finished pieces. I always make sure that I post to the Substack the finished drawings, and it's a week or two or more before I release it publicly. So if you want to be the first people to get it and get a copy you can download, that's a good way to do it, and helps me out. So let's say it's free. There's also a paid version. People who join the paid version get, among other things, process videos of all the drawings when they're done. It's usually 1 to 2 minute video which shows the whole drawing going from nothing to finished. Kind of entertaining. I like watching those, so hopefully you do too. Yeah. If you want to be a part of the larger Staniverse, you may want to consider becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Stanex. Go over there. You'll see what it's all about. There's a free layer there, which gets you all of the drawings that I do. Excuse me. And then there are paid layers which get you extra things too. I won't try and sell it too hard, but it'd be awesome. I am certainly trying to grow my audience, trying to grow the number of people who are in, as I say, the greater Staniverse. uh, and you know, you'll be the first to get access to lots of different things, and you'll over at the Patreon you will get discounts when I publish things. So please help yourself out. All right, that's it. I've been going here for nearly 2.5 hours, having a good time, but it's time for me to sign off and maybe go do a little work before I go to bed. So thank you all. I'll be back tomorrow night with a new episode of Random Encounters, the improv cartooning show. So hope you can join me then. Until then, take care, everyone. Bye.